Oh, we on live?
Not yet.
We should be.
Yep.
Yes, we are. And I will take it from my page here and I will share it to the group. So this will take one more second. And I'll put it on the page also. All right. That should be it. So, how is everybody today? Welcome to another episode of Blue Wave Conversations with Jamie, Vanessa, and Kimberly. Hey, woohoo! Our guest tonight is you. I actually am going to ask Kimberly to introduce a little bit more and tell us a little bit more about her. But Bianca Muskaitis, how did I say your name?
Muskaitis.
I love it. Yes, that's
so
much
sorry.
better than like what my dad
I can't
says,
get
'cause
the
he
name.
don't know.
I'm not good with names, but I'm awesome with faces. I bet you if I saw you with a mask on in the street, I would know who you are. That's how good I am with faces. Names, I am not. And I admit that that's my flaw. So I apologize, sweetheart. Thank you so much
don't
for coming.
apologize.
Thank you so much for being a part of the conversation. I'm so excited. I've heard great things about you.
Thank you.
And great things about what you're doing in the community as a whole. I'm excited. I'm actually honored that you were able to jump on tonight. So I just want to put that out there. And I'm looking forward to us doing some more things together. But tonight, I know you have a lot to offer to this conversation. So I'm going to let Kimberly go ahead and give you the introduction that you're worthy of. That's for sure.
So I don't think that I have enough time to cover everything that I think about this amazing woman right here. When I first met this young lady, it was upon entry to an amazing organization, the YMCA, and looking at all of the great things that they do in the community and all of the families and individuals that they support, I got enthralled in the organization. And then I came across this Spitfire that was all over the place, that was in the middle of everything and leading almost every effort. And I said, who is this girl? She and I need to talk. That is what we did. And it's been 8 years later, we're still talking. I can't tell you how resilient she is, in every situation, because in the last 8 years, just as a society, we've gone through so many twists and turns, and every organization is impacted by those twists and turns. And there are those few people who stay true to the mission, who stay true to the conversation, and who stay true to working the streets and the relationships to keep the efforts moving forward. And she is definitely one of those people. So now that we're going through this time of 2020, I don't even know what we're going to call it. I mean, we're going to have to come up with a special name for 2020, but now that we're going through this time of 2020, she has pivoted again and created a wonderful, informative podcast that really reaches out into the community to get conversations started, to provide support to the people who are most in need at this time, those small businesses, those families, all throughout the Virginia network. And so I am so happy to introduce you guys to this amazing woman, Bianca.
Thank you. I don't think I've ever had anybody introduce me like that. That warmed my whole soul. So thank you. I appreciate it. I have been in this area all my life. I grew up in Prince George's County and, lived in the DC area. And I'm a graduate from Wakefield and Arlington. And, me and my husband, we got together in 2010. And so, you know, we decided to develop our family and get married in 2015 and kind of take it from there. And we've lived in Reston since 2018. And I've worked for the Y for about 16 years, going on 17. And I just feel like community is a big part of why I have been doing what I've been doing, because the community helped me create a family that I have now, right? So I consider Kim one of my family members. You know, you have those people who you connect with, because once you talk on the phone with them, it's like nothing, right? Talked to Kim on the phone earlier today, and it was like we hadn't talked in no time. So I love it. I appreciate you all for having me on, and thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Well, I want to be family.
Yes,
You
yes,
are.
I
we
want
are
to be
family
family.
now. Yes, we
Y'all
are
are
family
cousins.
now.
Jamie too. We gave Jamie a new last name. She part of the family. She comes to the cookout.
Yes.
Yeah.
Ooh,
And
you made it to the
Jamie.
cookout. Yes.
and we even
I
let Jamie.
promise not to put raisins in anything.
We
Nothing.
trust Jamie to cook a dish.
Jamie
No
can
raisins.
come
She
to the
said
cookout,
no raisins.
and
I love it.
when she graduates, she'll be able to make the potato salad. How's that?
There you
That's
go.
what I was
Go,
going to ask.
Jamie.
When she
I'll
gets
bring you all some Pennsylvania Dutch salad.
Now you talking.
Now you talking.
Now
You
you
got-
talking.
You got to bring the apple butter with that too.
No, we still have a trip. Remember, we still have to get that trip done. We got to take Mary up there because she's never had it.
Never had apple
Never.
butter?
No, she's never had Amish food.
What? Girl, the Amish be laying it down, honey.
I told her.
The
They
Amish
put
lay
so
it
much thought.
The Amish
into
are
their food.
the Amish cook soul food.
The Amish lay it down.
No idea.
So
Maybe it's a food group for us. We do. We used to call my family reunion the Cholesterol Festival.
Well, as long as those green beans and cornbread are hitting right, I'm okay with it.
Yes. Yes.
We may cook them in fat. All of it.
That sounds delicious.
So, before we jump into conversation, what does Thanksgiving look like? Do you cook like Amish food, or is that like soul food, or
We cook traditional things that like other Americans do. We just tend to cook everything in bacon grease and fat because it tastes better.
well, then you sound like you from the deep South, because that's what we do.
But
It ain't no different.
But what makes it align, and I was talking to someone in the community, and Jamie, of course, you are the expert, so please correct me if I'm wrong, but similar to where our soul food originated from, you know, we had to learn how to, or our ancestors had to learn how to cook based off of the earth and the things that they had access to, and the resources that were being given to them from the house. And a lot of times it wasn't the main parts of the meat or the main parts of the plant or the main parts of these other places. So they had to create the food. And the Amish as a cult, as a community, they live off of the land. They are very holistic and they turn these into meals. So I think that's where the symmetry.
Yeah, we eat something called scrapple, and it's called scrapple because it's made of scraps.
We eat scrapple. I
don't. You just take the scraps and you put a lot of salt into it, because if you put enough salt in just about anything,
it turns out.
So my parents are both from North Carolina and South Carolina. And like Kim said, this is why people need to know American history. Okay. So historically, the enslaved people were thrown scraps from the slave master, and we had to become very good at preparing, cooking, and eating every part of the pig you can imagine. Okay. So when me and my cousins were 16, 17 years old, on New Year's Eve, my aunt would make pig brains. Okay. Let me tell you something. You may not like chitlins, but the way this woman cooked pig brains, you would eat them. They were delicious back in the day. So this is why it's important that Americans in general know a lot about Black American history.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Just putting that out there.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, but thank you. So how do you want to jump into the conversation today? I'm so excited about it. I think all of us have been impacted in some way by it. So who wants to take the lead on that? Okay, don't everybody jump up at once.
Well, I don't know how you want to do it. What you want to.
Mary.
I think Mary's working on our tech stuff. I can go through the stats first, and then we can go into the fun stuff because
Mary's working on the
tech.
transmission thing.
So,
Okay.
but I can go through the stats and we go into the fun stuff, and I'll be quiet. So, just for context, before we go into Bianca's stuff and making this the content that makes this real, for those of you who haven't been following this in detail, you know, it wasn't until 1967, and just to age myself, I was born in 1973. So that's just 5 years before that I was born, that we turned over the laws in this country that made it illegal for people to marry outside of their race. So just think about that. And at that point, you know, in the United States, 3% of all newlyweds were married to someone of a different race or ethnicity. So that's just 1967. So I think a lot of young people who might be watching this, that might seem like ancient history, that it was illegal to marry outside of one's own race or ethnicity. But that was just 5 years before I was born. That my boyfriend, just to make it clear, he's older than that. Although he's wonderful, but he's a little older than I am. But just, you know, just to put this into context, this is not an old situation. This is a new thing. And since then, a lot of things have changed. But I wanted to, you know, talk about that and just give us some statistics. But why have they changed and how have they changed? Well, the things that are driving this are attitudes, migration patterns, largely availability of partners. And I want to talk about that because this is, especially to the white women, the mass incarceration of Black men is a huge driver of this. And if you're not following this, especially to the white women watching, please educate yourselves. We all need to be having this conversation. We need to stop the mass incarceration of white men, because slavery is not over in this country until that ends, not by a long shot. So I want to talk about that real quick. But to get us to the fun part, the other driver of this is education. So just some interesting things to think about as we go through this. 1 in 7 infants in 2015 in this country, that's 14%, was multiracial or multi-ethnic. And this share is nearly triple of what it was in 1980. The thing that's interesting, though, is if you think about, you know, hear about these two Americas and how different parts of America are different. This is driven largely by metropolitan areas. So in metropolitan areas, almost 1 in 5 newlyweds right now are intermarried. So this is going to become the norm. By the time my boys grow up and get married, this is just going to be the way it is. It's going to become the norm, and it's not going. We aren't going to look at interracial marriages and see them as interracial marriages. It's just going to be a marriage. It's just going to be normal. And it's going to be something that isn't going to be, at least in my hope, something where there is discrimination and societal bias, which is a problem. But right in between 2000 and 2016, all states actually experienced an increase in the percentage of interracial and interethnic marriages and households. 2 states, Hawaii and Oklahoma, and DC actually increased by 4.34 percentage points or more. 9 states, mainly in the West and Mid-Atlantic regions, increased between about 3 and 4 percentage points. 17 states by about 2.4 to 3.3, and the remaining 22 states were less than 2% more. But all states are going up. This is ubiquitous across the country. And when you look at how attitudes are changing for this, nearly 4 in 10 adults, 39%, say the growing number of people marrying someone of a different race is good for society. This is good for us. And that's up from 24% in 2010. And adults younger than 30, so this is the younger half of millennials as well as Generation Z, Gen AI, and those with at least a bachelor's degree. I'm going to talk about the education factor here in a minute. And those who identify as Democrats or lean Democratic, we are a blue wave conversation, are especially likely to say that. Also, Americans today are less likely to oppose a close relative marrying someone of a different race. And now 10% say that they would oppose such a marriage in their family, down from 31% in 2000. 31% in 2000. That to me just sounds crazy. The biggest decline, shockingly, has occurred among non-Blacks. Today, 14% of non-Blacks say they would oppose a close relative marrying a Black person, down from 63% in 1990. Getting through this quickly, just so you can see, it does vary among races. Asians and Hispanic newlyweds are the most likely to be intermarried. The most common or the common racial or ethnic pairing is actually among newlywed intermarried couples is actually one Hispanic person and a white spouse. One of the most dramatic patterns, though, we're seeing when you look across the data among Black newlyweds is Black men are twice as likely as Black women to have a spouse of a different race or ethnicity, which is not surprising to Black women on the call, of course. And the gender gap is a long-standing one. In 1980, 8% of recently married Black men and only 3% of their female counterparts are married to someone of different race. This is the reverse among Asians. A significant gender gap in intermarriage is there among Asian newlyweds as well, but the gap is running in the opposite direction. So just over 1/3 of Asian newlywed women have a spouse of a different race, while it's only 21% of Asian newlywed men. So these are very different statistics among different races, but the drivers continue to be the same. The first thing is attitudes, and let's be clear, this is racism. Let's call it what it is. It's racism. While 72% of Black respondents said it'd be fine with them if a family member chose to marry somebody of another race, it's only 61% of whites and 63% of Hispanics. So we know where the racism is coming from. Sorry, is what it is.
But I wonder if that is, kind of similar to what we talked about when we talked about the exit polling, and how people vote when they're in the box and what they tell you they voted for when they come out might be two different conversations. I can tell you that it's still very much a source of contention within the African-American community. Whether or not we would outwardly say it in some ways is a different question, I think. Am I the only one that thinks that?
Bianca, you have thoughts?
She has thoughts. I saw it.
I have some thoughts, but I don't want to share. I want to let y'all.
That's me too. That's me too. I'm like, I just have
the conversation is where you let it out.
Okay, I might need some wine. Hold on.
Oh God. Yeah. Well, I just want to say this. I have some not questions, but I would like to be informed of different things, because one reason I had put up a post well over a month ago, just because of all the things that we were experiencing under this current administration and how racist he is, but people just don't want to, they just want to slap him on the wrist instead of slapping him across his face. What I saw was, what I started to see was Black men who were married to white women, or Black women that were married to white men, or Hispanic people that were married to whites, or vice versa, whatever, Asians, whatever it was. I started to see a lot of that, and I started to wonder, how are they dealing with that? Does it bring tension within the home? How are their kids dealing in the classroom, in schools? Because I know personally, I have seen just from this administration how in your face racism has become. Some people you don't see it from, but the ones who have had that hidden racism in them all this time, those were the people that would give you the sarcastic comments or make snide remarks or do kind of things backdoor. It's like, oh, I'm just kidding. No, you wasn't kidding. So now I wanted to find out, how are other people handling? Because see, when I come home to Black children, and my husband passed away, so I don't have that situation. But if I did, at that time, I would have come home to a Black man. We had Black children, So when we came home, I knew what this experience was, but I have no idea or how it feels or if there's any feelings when you hear and see both sides. And I might say, you know what? I don't understand why, this person does this at my, my job, or why does a white person feel this way about me? But I'm talking to my husband who's white. I don't know how that conversation happens at home. And I would just like to know, and I think a lot of people in the group would like to know, how does that exchange happen? Because we're not going to heal as a country until we all heal. And, we could say Black Lives Matter, and it does, but some Black lives are in interracial relationships, and who's actually helping them deal and heal? So this is the conversation I want to have, if that helps.
Oh, well, let me sip something really quickly. Hold on.
Yeah, my bestie brought me some wine to have with this conversation.
And this is the topic of family is how I want to close out 2020. Just so you all know, this is how I want to close out 2020, is dealing with families and how are we going to heal ourselves going into 2021 under a new administration, because they're not going to fix everything. We still live our day-to-day lives. We have to do that work ourselves.
Mm-hmm. I will speak. So during this year, I don't want people to think that just this year it's been an interesting time. I mean, the moment that you step into an interracial relationship, it's going to be an interesting time, right? Because you're going to have people who are not going to accept it from the get-go. And you're going to have people who are going to be open to it, right? But this specific year, with at least since March, right? It has been, you've had people come out of nowhere who you never expected that were saying inappropriate things or looked at you in a negative way. Right before, I was telling Kim, right before the election, I had somebody tell me my marriage was inappropriate. It wasn't a marriage that I was supposed to be in, because you're not supposed to create with someone outside of your race. And so, just to hear something like that before you have the election, and I really feel like it's because of the election that came out, right? They probably have been feeling that from however long, but the administration we're under lets that be okay for them to say it. And so they decided to vocalize whatever they said. And it was a white person who said it to me, and they weren't family. And I guess I wasn't so surprised, but dealing with my husband at home, we have these conversations all the time. We just have conversations. My husband grew up in Prince George's County, and he has 3 Black siblings because he grew up in an adopted family. So it's a family of 6. It's a family of 3 white kids, 3 Black kids. He grew up in that dynamic. He never looked at their race until they got to an older age and had to experience whatever they had to go through, right? And for him, whenever we talk, we just talk about anything. So when it comes to racism, when it comes to just anything, we talk about it. So people have been asking me through this whole time, how has it been having those conversations about what's been going on? I feel like it's no different. We have been talking about this, and I think that's what has kept us together, because when the whole Black Lives Matter thing came out a few years ago, we had to do some research on it. I wanted to figure out what that meant, right? I had never had somebody tell me Black Lives Matter, like they really matter. And I was like, wow, that sounds very powerful. So like, how do we go about that? And my husband took the time to learn about it as well. And he was like, wow, I've never heard anybody say that or need to say that, right? Because the area where we grow up in, which I grew up in DC, Maryland, and Virginia, you just kind of never think about that. So when we heard it, we were like, wow, okay. Did some research and kind of figured that is definitely a movement that we want to support. And his parents actually have taken the time to learn about it. They never thought about it as well, but they feel like with their grandchildren being that next generation, that they need to take the time to learn that. And I appreciate that. So my family has been very open to conversation about what's been going on. And I don't know everything, but I do know what I grew up in, and I do know what I experience now. And we've experienced stuff throughout the whole entire 10 years we've been together, whether it's local or whether you travel, right? Because whenever you go somewhere different, it's totally not the same as home. But it's been a very interesting time this year specifically, but not in a bad way. I feel like it's educational.
Yeah, yeah. I think it has a lot to do also with the upbringing. Like you said, you talked about, his dynamic in his home growing up and what he was exposed to. I won't go into too much specific about my situation because I'm not with my son's father. But if the other person does come from a more conservative area, sometimes it's a little harder to have those conversations. So speaking from the mom of a biracial child, it has been a very sensitive path to navigate when having these conversations, especially this year when he's now at an age where he is more aware of what's happening and he's watching it because it's in his face. And I have to take into account both sides of this conversation so that he understands, so that he doesn't walk away feeling guilt on either side. Either it's, the guilt that we own as being African Americans and having this perception placed upon us, or if it's the guilt, that's placed on the majority because of the L's that are happening in the global community. And he has to be in between because he represents both. But the one thing that I do help him understand is the history of the terminology. And I think that is a huge part of this conversation too. I think Mary spoke to it before about the things that people say that are just outwardly, ignorant, or the things that they say and they try to backtrack like, oh, I didn't mean it. It was just,
I didn't mean it.
Whatever. But there's also a space of just a lack of being educated. So one of the things that I had to navigate with him, especially found in Loudoun, where there's a high population of certain demographics, right? Certain cultures. And the way that my son looks, they just attributed him to being a part of that culture. But he's Black and Italian and Irish. He's not Indian. Or he's not, although that's the majority in some cases, they just put him there. But then also the wanting to call him brown instead of Black. He's Black. You've seen his mother. He's Black. And we have to kind of educate ourselves about the history of the terminology, where that comes from, how we assign it, but also the sensitivities of it, and I don't want him walking through like saying, well, I'm brown, you're Black. And, but also paying homage to all of what makes him up and feeling pride in it. And it has been a difficult conversation to navigate this year, I can tell you for sure. I mean, like you said, Bianca, all throughout, but especially because now he's 11 and he sees it and it's so pronounced.
Yeah. And see, my kids are so young. I have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, and they're not really exposed to that. They have no idea what's going on. They're floating in their own world, which is kind of perfect right now, in a sense, right? You don't want them to be depressed or feeling down and out or trying to figure out what in the world is going on.
Or even questioning who they are.
Yeah, right. My children.
That's a big hurdle.
Yeah, I have, I've been struggling with this over the past few months of what do I do when it is the right time to talk to my kids about what race they are, right? Because, in our culture, at least in the African American culture, once you are mixed, you're Black, right? Like your kids, they're identified as Black kids, right? But I want them to know both sides. I want them to understand what is going on both sides. And I feel like that is the part that I'm struggling with, because I want everybody, I mean, it takes a village, right? I want everybody in my village to be able to teach my children both sides and not be one side on this, you know. So I've been struggling with that because I don't even know. People are just now learning about things. People are just now learning about Juneteenth. That's very random, but like just learned about it. And then they look at you like, did you know about this? Yeah, I knew. What? Yes.
Yes. That
You
part
know,
has been so crazy this year.
that
I don't
part
want to
has
talk
been
about what
crazy
happened
to
this
me.
Juneteenth, but
You're right.
No,
Right.
I mean, God rest his soul, George Floyd, and it's, you know, people are like, I can't believe this has happened, and I'm like, where have you been the last 10 years? Because this is not the first.
Yeah, it's been a, you know, so everything that has come, but it's just, I don't know. It's going to be interesting telling the story to my 3-year-old and my 1-year-old as they grow up, because 2020 should be a history book in itself. It
Yeah.
should be its own separate book of life because we've experienced so much in such a short amount of time. That is going to be very hard to just remember and tell our kids.
Yeah. Do you ever find, as far as politically, I mean, it sounds like your husband kind of comes from maybe the same, I know PG County is typically Democratic. And so throughout his family, so there's his parents, and yes, his parents opted to have a diverse family, but they are a part of an extended family unit, right? Uncles and sometimes, unfortunately, that's where it comes from, which is so random because for me, I'm like, you are a non-factor, like save it. But sometimes that's where it comes from. And how have you ever been confronted, especially now because there's such a divide, and I think you said it earlier today, there's no gray, like that gray has just disappeared. Now it's your black, white, set. And you're either on the side of liberal or side of, you know, conservative, whatever these tags are. There's no meeting in the middle. So do you find that you run up against that conversation within the families, even your own?
So, in my own family, we don't have anybody who supports Trump, right? We are all Democratic or liberal, and you know, we all voted for Biden, right? We had no arguments. That is what it is. On my husband's side, you know, much wasn't really talked about. There were a few of his family members who were vocal about who they were going to vote for, in a sense that they were voting for Biden, but they didn't, you know, some of the people who I really looked to figure out who they were going to vote for or what their views were, I didn't really get that, which was kind of sad because that also led me to believe that they weren't ready for that conversation. And that's, why wouldn't you be ready for that conversation? What's holding you back? If you have questions, or even if you have a voice of you don't like something, wouldn't you want to just talk about it? Maybe that's just me. But I feel like the silence spoke enough too, right? The silence kind of let me know, okay, great. I'm going to go ahead and take a step back. I know where your views are. You haven't said much about it, but now I kind of know because you haven't said much about it if I've asked you. So I haven't had any full-blown arguments with any family members or anything on either side, but I'm ready if they want it. But
you know, I did see. Just, you know, if you really want to make sure though, that I do have a suggestion, we should not bring politics to Christmas. So if you don't want to do that, you can get some Biden wrapping paper and just wrap all your gifts in the Biden wrapping paper. And then none of us talked about it. I'm just saying.
They also have a lot of, I've seen a lot of ornaments out there too.
I haven't seen
on your Christmas tree.
Get those. Yeah.
I'm just going to wrap everything in Biden wrapping paper and just see what happens.
No, but that's but you hit what I was saying, Bianca, before, that Mary touched on about, you know, people aren't necessarily going to say always how they feel about the situation, but you can tell through the silence, you could tell through the politeness, right? There's this there's this polite courtesy of, yes, hi, you know, like I'm accepting, I'm going to act like it so we can just get through this dinner, you know, situation. And I am one of those people who likes to kind of clear the air and clear the space. So I probably would have been that person just to kind of go direct and ask the question just to kind of bring it out of them. So Jamie, I try not to argue at dinners. I do.
Don't argue over dinner.
I do. I will get a to-go box in a second. Okay.
Well, now this is the converse. No, I'm going to say white people need to be held accountable. We do. We need to be having these conversations. We need to be held accountable for the realities and the harm that systemic racism has caused and the benefits that we have garnered from it. At some point, we're not even willing to have the conversation. Like, you're not even asking them to fix it. You're not asking for reparations to be paid. You're just asking them to have the conversation.
Because my thing is that if you don't have the conversation, and even in your politeness, if I can pick up on it, kids are not deaf mutes. Yeah. They can pick up on it too. And this is not something that I want them to be raised under, because now you've created a whole nother generation of this tension. And that's, I think, for me, why I try to challenge people to talk about it and to confront our own. I mean, because I could have it too. I'm not going to say that I've always been in this space. I mean, when I ended up in an interracial relationship, it surprised my whole family. They were like, really? Fight the power Kim who went to Howard and Patty Woods? Like, really? Well, no, yeah. but love is, you know, I mean, relationships or whatever, they take their own twists and turns, and sometimes life surprises you. So, you know, this is where we are. But if you don't talk about where you are so that you can get to a better place, you're never going to get there. And people feel it. Whether you say it or not, people feel it.
And I'm sorry, white women, we need to sit in the uncomfortable space. We just do. We're going to have to sit in this uncomfortable space. The thing you brought up, you know, learning about Juneteenth, and, you know, this year was the 100th anniversary of white women getting to vote. It was of white women getting to vote. And was it uncomfortable when we had to put that caveat? Yes, we get to be happy. It's been 100 years since women who look like I do got to vote, but that's the reality. We need to be willing to sit in this uncomfortable space. And is it uncomfortable? Yeah, it is. It's an uncomfortable space to sit in, but we can't make the world better if we're not willing to be a little bit uncomfortable.
Now, question.
So let me break in here because y'all doing all the talking. Okay.
Well, we were waiting for you.
So, Bianca.
My bestie brought me some wine.
Bianca, first of all, thank you so much for jumping on the call at a short notice. I love people, particularly women, who can pivot like that. I'm an instant fan of yours. Okay,
Thank you.
I love the fast pivot. You can have anything you want from me. Okay.
No, thank you. Yeah.
So I want to touch on a couple things. I want to touch on something you said earlier about you know, liking the fact that your kids are younger and you don't necessarily have to get into these conversations yet. Mm-hmm. But I want you to think about something, and I want you to keep in mind that what's going to be important is for you and your husband to get to your kids before they get to kindergarten, because that's where it's going to start. Kindergarten. Okay. Because here's the thing, and I will be on my soapbox about this for the rest of my life. Racism is taught at home. Bigotry, hate, division is taught. It's learned behavior. So that means it's coming from the home. Okay. Yeah. So before your kids hit kindergarten, you're going to have to sit them beautiful little girls down. I already been to your Facebook page. I saw them. They're gorgeous, right?
Thank you.
You're going to have to sit them down and have the talk.
Yeah.
And you know what the talk is. So I just wanted to say that as a mom of 2 Black sons, I literally have the Trayvon talk before they leave the house every day.
Yeah.
And it's very disheartening to me to have the Trayvon talk with my sons literally every day.
Mhm.
And if anybody gets on this live talking about, oh, in Loudoun County, yes, Loudoun County,
It's funny that you,
especially.
yeah, especially in Loudoun
Don't give
County.
me that Loudoun
Yeah.
County bull crap. Y'all thinking y'all live in Mayberry? No.
Mhm.
Well,
Right?
we've got a shop out in
So
Percival with a Nazi flag hanging out the window that you can see it.
you got plenty of Confederate Nazi
Saw that.
flags between downtown Leesburg and West Virginia. I could count
Yeah.
them.
Mhm.
Okay. So I don't want to hear no crap about that. So as Black women, women of color, and women of color, we have to have these conversations every day. And you know, I just wanted to say that again because I had a conversation with someone this week and I had to end the conversation because I think I was going to punch her dead in her jaw. Because when you're not educated and you don't have a world view about you, then you will stay in that town or that city that you've never left, and your perspective will never change.
Mhm.
So, education and travel are the key.
Mhm.
Getting out of the United States is the key because you're going to see the way other countries and other people live.
Right.
Mhm.
So, I just wanted to say that, and this is a wonderful topic.
Mhm.
This is a tremendous topic because it allows us to look across the spectrum of everybody in this country and say that basically we're all the same.
Mhm.
Mhm.
We just look kind of different
And
on
that
the on the outside,
and
right?
that is facts. I mean, at the end of the day, we all want the same things as moms, as parents, as individuals, and the same way that you would feel having to tell your child something as devastating as when they go out into this world, they're going to have to navigate and walk differently.
Differently.
And the only reason, the only justification is because of the color of their skin. And I promise you, I want to cry because these, you know, I've had to have this conversation so many times with my son. And if anybody knows my son, he is the,
A
I mean, and I might,
sweetheart.
and I might be biased. I might be
No,
biased,
he's a sweetheart.
He
but
is.
he is a bumblebee. He is the
Uh,
person who, since he was a baby, walks in, Bianca, you know, hi, I'm
Yes.
sorry, hello,
Mhm.
you look so great. Hello. He
Mhm.
thinks the world is a big ball of roses and he is
Mhm.
here to start the party. And it's devastating to have to what we call crack his face and just be like, I'm sorry to bust your heart, but it's not going to be that way. And I have to prepare him and have those conversations. And all you can see is the questions on his face of, well, why? And it's just so unfair. And the fact that us as
Very
adults
unfair.
are having to fight so hard to get other people to understand the position that they are forcing a whole culture of people, half of this country's population, you are putting them in this situation for no other reason.
For no other reason.
The fact that we have to fight so hard to get you to realize that, that's the real travesty. That's the real devastation.
And for the white women listening to this, when you're looking for examples of white privilege, if you're looking for real examples of white privilege, I don't have to do this with my sons. I don't ever have to have these conversations with my sons. You're hearing this consistently from every Black mom on this call. If you're looking to explain really what white privilege is, and I know sometimes you talk to people who just don't get it, this is it. The fear that you're hearing and the sadness, this is real. And we don't have to experience this as mothers. I'm not saying I don't have fears as a mom, but I don't have this fear. I don't have to have this conversation with my boys. And I do have 3 teenage boys. I don't have to have this conversation. So But we have the power to tear this down and make it right and make it better. And we can do it now.
And it's important that we do it when we have the spotlight on this issue. You know, we just came through an election that was basically just what we're speaking of. People don't want to live like this anymore. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about the economy. It wasn't about any of this stuff. It was about whatever normal was, we prefer what it was to what it is. And, you know, where we did have things that we had to work out before, we've got to dig through now to get back to where we were before to start to work things out. So while we have women, particularly white women, particularly women in this group, and even beyond, who are interested, hey, I don't even know. White privilege is another show that we're going to do in December, just because people don't know what that is. And it's not pointing a finger at you because you have, or you're better than, or anything. That's not what it's about. It's just the certain basic day-to-day things that you may take for granted. We have to think about, we have to strategize and plan with our kids and say, don't take this road after this time of night, take the long way home if you're driving. Don't take, you know, it's a whole different conversation. So we just want to have people understand that this is what it's like, so that you can have conversations with your friends. You know, you might be a white woman with a Black girlfriend. Say, you know what? I just heard this conversation, and is this what you've been going through? My God, what support can I offer you? That's what we're trying to do. We're not trying to separate. We're not trying to alienate. We're not trying to make it, woe's me, I'm Black, and we got all this rough stuff to go through, and it's your fault. No, we're not doing that. We just want to have an open, honest conversation about what it is and what the experience is, so that you'll know what those experiences are and join forces with us, because the only way we're going to get through this is like we did this election.
Yeah,
and together.
And I
But,
do
it's,
want,
but it's called empathy, understanding, and being a good human being. That's what it's called.
well, that's what I was about to speak to. I think one of the things, the tactics or strategies that I try to take, because a lot of times when we're having this conversation, I think the inability to listen or have empathy or understand is because their immediate human response is to be defensive. Like, well, I didn't do anything. Well, I show up. Well, I'm this, I. And they're not understanding the bigger dynamic that really doesn't include an I, rather it's a collective of we. And so I try to take it off of, let's say, America. This conversation, although we have a very specific, you know, situation here, dynamic here in America between African American, because I always say African Americans, unlike any other culture globally that experiences this sort of disenfranchisation, we are the only one that had to kind of reestablish our culture, reestablish our identity, and reestablish our connectivity to our ancestors, because it was stripped away from us intentionally. Our identity was stripped away from us. You think my ancestor's last name was Newman? It wasn't. But I had to be able to search out that information and search out that history and connect to it. Other cultures, they have that lineage. They carry it with them as they travel from continent. But when we talk about these sort of situations where there's discourse or there is a majority and a minority, in other continents, they experience in some way the same conversation. So if you take yourself out of the dynamic and you're looking at it from an American, and let's say to someone in South Africa or someone in, you know, the situations in India, and you're talking about, you can have the empathy when you're looking at that situation.
Understand that.
Oh, okay, Siri. When you can understand it as a woman sitting here in America looking at South America. You know that apartheid was wrong, right? You have the empathy for what they went through, right? You were able to connect and say there had to be a solution, right? So how are you not able to take that same atrocity and acknowledge that it's happening in your own front yard? that's the part that I try to kind of bring them full circle to say, take it off of yourself and compare it to what you see happening in other cultures. Is America really that great that we just don't have these things and they're all made up? Or could there be some validity to it that we need to dissect?
So I'm going to ask the hard question, because the one stat that I had that I didn't get to, and I know you ladies know the answer to this, but I want the other folks on the phone to hear this, is one of the things is driving interracial marriage, particularly among Black women, is the lack of availability of partners, specifically systemic and mass incarceration of young Black men, together with higher death rates of young Black men. And I know you guys a lot of you have sons, so I'm sorry to state that, but I think we need to state it for the folks to hear it. And as such, that Black women are much less likely to get married than women of any other, get married at all, ladies. I want the folks online to hear this, than women of any other race in the US. This together with higher Black unemployment rates. And let's be honest I'm a labor economist. A big driver of those Black unemployment rates are the fact that we throw young Black men in jail for things like pot, that we don't throw young white men in jail for. Let's be very clear, which then makes young Black men unemployable.
Or murder, and we call it that they were, rich and they suffer from, what is it called, elitism? What was it called?
Affluenza. Affluenza. I'm so rich, I murdered people. And it's an illness to be this rich. But so the result of this is that there's just too few Black eligible men to marry Black women. And the reality is that Black women are kicking ass in college. As far as share of, if you look at the demographics, Black women are the most likely now to be going to college. They're going to be the most likely to graduate from college. And people marry people with a like educational level. And one of the other big drivers of interracial marriage is actually education. The higher educated you are, the more likely you are to intermarry. So I did want to talk to, I know it's a hard subject, and I'm obviously getting emotional talking about it, because we talk about this mass incarceration and the high death rates. But how has this affected the community, and I know it's indelicate, but what are your thoughts on this, and what would you want folks to know about it?
Well, I can say, just from the stats that you mentioned about Black women getting married, and most of us probably not getting married, I can just speak to my family at whole without even mentioning names. Out of the 5 women in my generation, between my cousins, my close cousins, my first set of cousins, on one side of my family, there are 5 of us. I'm not going to even deal with the other side. Just the 5 of us on my mom's side of the family. 2 of us are married. My husband's deceased, so one of us still has a husband. I probably will not get married again because I don't feel like dealing with the drama. I don't, and that's just me being real. I don't want to be somebody's owner. I don't want somebody telling me what to do anymore. I'm established in my ways, and I got my own stuff going on. I don't need somebody to, I don't need that. If you're not going to be a solid partner, if you're not going to be somebody that is down for the cause, so to speak, I'm surpassed me trying to help build you up. And that's straight talk.
That's straight talk.
I think, I kind of am a little bit all over the gamut when it comes to that conversation, because it is a conversation I've had since I was a kid. I grew up in an area that was not very diverse at the very beginning. I was the only African-American girl pretty much up until 5th grade. And then I had my one partner come and glory be, we are still, buddies, and that's how it was. So the African-American boys and men, young men, didn't have many quote unquote choices, but also it was kind of our surroundings. So most often, although they were our best friends, our buddies, they dated white girls in junior high and high school. That's what we dealt with. But this was back in the 90s. So it was a different type of conversation. Back then it was kind of like only in certain areas was that prevalent. So in Gaithersburg, it was prevalent. But when you went into Silver Spring, oh my gosh, you know, jungle fever, we're not doing that. So it really depended upon where you were from. But that experience kind of formed my opinion of it at the time. And it was very conservative. It was, you know, a lot of the people that I spoke to in my community dated for not the right reasons. It was because of this or because of that, but nothing involving love and relationships. And we just liked each other. And then as I got older and I started to experience it more and got in a more diverse community, then I kind of saw the other sides of it and then had to develop my own opinion. So I think it actually runs the gamut. It is an independent conversation, like how you fell in love is not necessarily how the other person fell in love, but there is a lot of justification for the issues that have to do with self perception and projecting it into your relationships or self-identity. There are issues with wanting to assimilate into certain environments easier, so you align yourself with certain relationships. There's justification for the financial conversation. There's also justification for things like the retaliatory, people who seek out those relationships almost to punish those in their communities, right? You know, there's so many variations as to what propels people into these dynamics. I don't think anyone can necessarily lead the conversation. Like I wouldn't say the majority of the reasons is because, you know, of education. But are there those cases? Absolutely. Especially in the, you know, in our community, men are raised to be macho men. They're raised to be, you know, whether they're able to accomplish it or not for a myriad of reasons, but mentally the identity is attached to I'm the leader, I'm the head. And so there does become a dynamic shift if the woman turns out being the head and turns out being the financial breadwinner. And sometimes that can break down the family unit and end up causing it to sever. Whether or not that propels her into a relationship, an interracial relationship, I don't know.
Well, I'm going to address a comment that someone put up. She said she heard Mrs. Hayes state that we want to get back to the way that we were. I disagree. We were never in a place where we needed to be in regards to equal rights. Racism didn't cease to exist. It has always existed. Rather, it was underlined or undercover, but I feel we need to move towards something different and something better. We addressed that already. And I'm the last person to say that we were ever normal. So what you did not hear me say was, and in that same tidbit was that, you know, whatever type of normalcy it was that we had, we're no longer even there, is what I said, okay? And then the conversation before that, which you missed, was addressing the fact of the hidden racism and the sarcasm and all of that other stuff. So you don't disagree with me, sweetie.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's more of a conversation of under this administration, so I say to people, there's a difference between someone who does not accept you, and there's a difference between someone who targets you. So we already knew the dynamic in the US is what it was, and we were trying to navigate that conversation. There were some allies, there were some foes, but you know, we were working in our silos to get the conversation where it needed to be. Whether or not people were moving that conversation forward remained to be seen. Some presidents did, some presidents didn't. But when you have one that leverages that conversation and weaponizes it to create his following, that is where the difference comes from. It wasn't just a non-acknowledgement, it was a strategic, we're going to use this conversation to alienate a certain group of people to appease another. That's a totally different dynamic. And that's where, for me personally, I became pretty disappointed because I don't claim to be any more educated than the average person. I figure the same, I mean, I know common sense is not as common, I get it, but access to information is readily available to everybody. If you don't,
I need to interrupt you though, because you did go to the same school as the vice president elect. I'm just throwing it out there.
so we call that the real HU. I just want to put that out there. I'm sorry.
I'm just throwing it out there. Kim went to the
Well,
same school as the vice president elect.
I want to disagree with Kim on that as well, because you are extremely more educated than people that I see every day walking around.
Please tell her.
So
We're calling you out, Kim.
Don't downplay that, honey, please.
No,
Okay.
but I'm trying to give the world, you know.
I know, and you are so nice and pleasant, but I'll
Yeah.
be the one to say it.
And we
Okay.
have to stop as Black women too, trying to bow out when we know what we're talking about.
Absolutely.
If you
But
know your stuff, you
Absolutely.
stick to your stuff.
You
Okay.
know what you're talking about. Everybody on this call knows what we're talking about in our own area of expertise.
got it.
Okay. This
I
is what we have to learn to stop doing. We just got to stop it. I know you're being humble.
No. It's not even necessarily being humble. I'm just saying it that with that acknowledgement or with that statement, I charge everybody to be able to raise to that bar. We all have the capability. Google is only a laptop away. If you don't have it, go to the library. To me, I think back to Jamie's point months ago, there's a lack of interest to locate it. So
Yep.
don't come to me with this conversation that you don't know this is the situation.
Right.
You know, the people that support him that, like you said, Vanessa, want to live in this box or under this rock, they're not searching for the information or wanting to know the truth.
Yes.
They would just rather live in their space. So
Well, they may be Googling, but it's availability bias. They're going to search for the one crazy
they're going to
whack
Parler.
job search that agrees with them. And to your point, I liked what you said about him he has weaponized racism. That's
Right.
what he's done in a literal sense, because we have these domestic terrorist organizations that he recalls them militias. It is a literal weaponization, and it is scary. I mean, they conspired to kidnap a governor. How is that not treason?
This is what Americans also have to understand. When that tyrant came down that escalator with his awful birther wife, okay, who snuck her parents into this country, all right?
Yep.
When he came down that escalator, he hired the most racist, awful, bigoted people in his administration, because this was already in the works from what he had did to Black people and the Central Park 7 decades before.
Did you see what he
So
just did?
if anybody with a Google machine, okay, if they sit up here and say that this man is anything other than what he has shown us, you're ignorant and you're stupid. Period.
Right.
And I'm saying it.
Did you see who he just placed? So the Holocaust not recognition, it's a organization that honors survivors of the Holocaust. He placed in position to lead that organization the gentleman that was removed from the White House a few years back because they caught him on film at the Charlottesville protest, and he has made habitual comments about devaluing the impact of the Holocaust. So everyone is standing up and saying, how disrespectful could you be?
Well, he's going to do everything he can over the next 2 months to tear everything down.
This week.
And I don't know if I dreamt this. Oh no, I didn't dream it. I was watching the news before I went to sleep. And there was a gentleman on there who just wrote a book. I have to find out who he is. It was on CNN. And he basically said some of the things that we were saying here during the whole election campaign. And that was, we have now, the things that we have taken for granted, we said it on one of these shows before, But the things that we have taken for granted with the president and the person who is in that office, we are now going to have to make laws and policies and standards and put it in writing that you must concede after you lose, or you cannot, you have to take your businesses and set them aside, or whatever it is. He laid it out so well last night. I'm going to see if I can find that clip, and then I'm going to put it in the group. But basically what he was saying, we have to now put these things in place that we thought was a courtesy before, because we now have somebody in office that doesn't play fair. He doesn't, he doesn't hold himself to any standard. So now we have to put them in place.
The fact of the matter is that the emoluments clause exists. But when you put people in place that do not enforce these laws in the Constitution or wherever they are, then they're not going to be enforced, and then he can step right over them. This is what I'm saying about how he came into being with plans already written to brush aside anyone that wasn't white, male, and wealthy. If you are not white, male, and wealthy in the United States, according to him, you don't mean crap to him. And he's proven it every single day for 4 years.
But let's take a step back, though, and have a little hope. Now, I'm not denying that he's probably trying to have a coup, but the man from Scranton and Mamala will be in office in January. And then one of the most dangerous things that Trump did was to create this Schedule F, which would have taken what I call careerists, which are people who went through the Merit Systems Protection and got hired in the federal government and worked their way up the ladder in jobs as regular government employees who, as their career. That's why we call them careers. They're not political appointees. And so we created this other way of bringing people in to take senior people, like maybe a Dr. Fauci, who drive policy, and make them political appointees, which would have taken large swaths of the federal government and make them beholden to the president instead of the American people. President Biden this week announced a draft of his first executive order. And among other things, he is going to eliminate Schedule F, which hasn't even been fully implemented. But that was an incredibly dangerous thing for the American people. So rather than coming in as president, Biden could have and said, okay, we've set this precedent, I'm going to do it too. He's going to start tearing down the evil that Trump has put in. He's going to take away the clause that eliminated diversity and inclusion training. I won't go through all the things that are on that draft, but we have some good news.
We're going to have to go over that good news.
We do have some good news.
Yeah.
But we can't lose sight of the fact that everything he's done to tear down everything in this democracy is going to take decades to reverse. But we are up to the challenge in reversing them. We may not even see these things reversed in our lifetime, but maybe our kids will see it. I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful about that part.
Yeah. Vanessa, I would love for you. I had a conversation with a friend of mine recently, and we were talking about electoral votes. And during that conversation, we talked about the importance of voting on the local level and knowing about the elections that are coming up in the very near future that, in my view, are probably more important, honestly, than the presidential election, because this will determine what the president is able to do. And so you having that experience, just make a quick comment about that, about, when we talk about even these issues, that the president is making all these laws, and during the voting process, he's connecting with the people on the local level to try and help him get through. And if we have not done our due diligence to put the right people in place on the local level, they may help him flip it. But if we secured that space before, there would be no concern. But that strategy, we didn't,
Well, I got a great example of that. So right before I ran for office, um, the reason what this is the reason why I ran for office, and I think I told you guys a story before. So the current occupant was determined to tear down Michelle Obama's healthy food
Legacy.
push,
Mhm.
and he wanted to change the nutrition triangle. Everybody knows the nutrition triangle, right?
Mhm.
The food triangle. Okay. So he sends out his lackey, Purdue, out to Loudoun County, Leesburg, for a photo op at my children's elementary school back in 2017.
Wrong school.
And he said, he told them, he said, you go out there and you tell those parents in that school, Catoctin Elementary School, that the kids aren't eating the lunches that Michelle Obama wants them to eat because they don't have enough sugar in them. And then you also go out there and you tell them that they need to put more chocolate, chocolate strawberry milk on the menu for the kids and put more sugar in the food so that the kids will eat it. So what did Purdue do? Of the Purdue chicken family, he came out and snuck into the school because it was approved by the school superintendent of Loudoun County, who's a Republican. Okay. So if people don't know what's going on with the folks that we elect or hire into these positions, then things like Sonny Purdue are going to keep happening.
Yeah.
When I found out, someone called me 911 and said, Vanessa, you got to leave work right now and come out to the school because this is what's happening. I sped up Route 7 like you never saw, stopped at the school, and not only were people outside peaceful protesting because that fool was inside the school and then was taking pictures with children without their parents' consent. The school superintendent approved this. Do you all understand what I'm saying? That's why that fool escaped to Texas. Couldn't
Can,
could couldn't handle Loudoun County.
can we
This
also
is
put
the
this into
so,
context?
so
Go
we
ahead,
have
Vanessa.
to, but we have to ensure that when we go to support anyone that is running for public office or anyone that is going to sit on your school board, we need to look into their backgrounds and find out what they're all about.
Yeah.
That's how you determine who you're going to support.
Mhm.
I do want to put that into context though, because I feel like, Michelle Obama really got vilified for that program. And it was so important. And, Trump going after that, he claims he loves our military. And for anybody who wasn't following, in 2010, our retired generals, about 20 of them and admirals and a whole bunch of people, wrote this report called Too Fat to Fight. And this was about our kids. And it's retired military leaders want junk food out of America's schools. Our children are so overweight and so unfit and unhealthy that it is a literal threat to national security. So Trump going after our kids' lunches is propelling a threat to national security.
Which seems to be a theme with him.
Yes, so I'm starting to see a trend here. So one, I don't know why he wants our kids to get type 2 diabetes and make ketchup a vegetable and put more sugar into things. But yes, like I don't know why he wants to do that. But Michelle
You're not
Obama's
sure?
initiative.
'Cause
Well,
they
I
don't
am
think-
absolutely. Could it be Putin? But Michelle Obama's initiative
Gave it away.
from any other first lady, would have been incredibly well received. She wants our kids to move, be healthy. She wants to make our school lunches healthier. When we have kids this is the first generation of kids who are not going to live their parents. Diabetes costs us a fortune and healthcare. It's one of the impediments to us being able to successfully and affordably go forward with a lot of our healthcare initiatives, which by the way would be cheaper anyway, but that's another conversation. But when you read that, if you have time to read through that report, it's, you know, it's 10 years old now, Too Fat to Fight, and we still haven't done jack. The only person who's really done anything to try to address this national security concern is Michelle Obama, and Donald Trump tried to undo that.
Because he didn't like her because she's a Black, strong woman.
Who showed her bare arms. Meanwhile, we saw her bare. Let me just tell you, if I had arms like Michelle Obama, I would not be sitting in front of you in long sleeves today. I'd be flexing those muscles on this camera every chance I got.
Right. Right.
So, ladies, we admittedly, I know we're over time, but we admittedly kind of hijacked this conversation from Bianca. And Bianca, do you have any parting words of wisdom for our audience here?
When it comes to interracial marriage, I say don't look at it as interracial marriage, just look at it as marriage. Let it be who you love. Nobody should judge your love, right? So don't let anything get to you. And I've learned that over the 10 years I've been with my husband. I used to let a lot of things get to me in the beginning and question why I would have done something like this, right? Why would I even say that? But I think once you get over that and you just have the confidence to move forward from people judging you, then you live your best life. And that's all I can say is
I wanted
love
to
you
ask,
guys.
One thing I wanted to mention, because like you said, we are over time and we got to wrap this up. But you made a comment a while ago, and I've been waiting to jump back to this point. Was you mentioned some family members who were silenced, and that spoke to you what their stance was. I would like to play an advocate here and just say, give them a chance, because some people don't know how to open up and have that conversation, and they may want to. So you can gauge that because you know them.
Mm-hmm.
But there may be some people that don't want, their silence might be more of shyness or being timid, or like, I don't even know what to say. I just feel so bad. I don't even know what to say or how to have this conversation. So I'm just not going to say anything.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just saying that to you, and because that might be a relationship or an opportunity to have a conversation, and they just not know how to do it.
Yeah, can I ask? I'm going to ask two things for the Mayo Sapiens watching. How do we? Two questions. One, what is the wrong way to open the conversation? And two, what is the right way? Because it can be really hard. And I think that it's scary because, you know, we are faced with, you know, being a good ally, the whole concept of caping versus being a good friend, and all of it can be really scary. And the whole concept of not making it about white women and white women's tears and being a good listener. What's the right way to open it and what's the wrong way? So that, because I think there are a lot of women out there, white women in particular, who want to be good listeners, but we don't know how to do it.
That's a really good question. I had a friend of my child's, like, you know, so we have a preschool friend and they haven't been to school in a while, and they reached out to me because they wanted to figure out like how to start that conversation of learning, right? They had no idea. For me personally, with my personality, I think there is no wrong way to start the conversation. Even if you were to say something really ignorant or whichever, there's always a way to turn it around, right? To make them understand that what they stated was ignorant, because they might not know. I think when I was approached by this one mom, she started the conversation with, I had no idea. I don't know what's happening outside of my bubble. And I was like, wow. I mean, that took a lot for her to say that in general, because she had to figure out what her bubble is, right? What does that even mean for her? So there's no right or wrong way to start a conversation with me. It's more of, can you start it? Can you just let me know that you want to?
And are you willing
Whether
to?
you're a family or a friend, it's just giving me that inkling that you want to start the conversation. And it's going to be awkward because it's just an awkward thing to talk about.
Yeah. I do want to ask one question before we head out too, because the one thing that I love to see in this demographic that this group is made up of is the diversity in thought, diversity in backgrounds, diversity in color. There are women that are a part and men that are a part of this group from all different areas of the country, some very Republican areas. And, you know, we have had threads where white women have come up and said, I've had to argue with my family. I've had to defend, you know, my position to take a look deeper or to, like you said, have this conversation. And they're just not willing to have it. I know that you being in that mix of a family, what would you say? Because there's always that question of, well, what can I do to help? And it's never what they think. It's like, I don't need you, like Jamie says, to cape for me. I'm a grown woman. I got this. But I need you to talk to your other family members, and that's who you need to cape for. Like, that's who you need to really address. So how would you speak to them to really encourage them to, you know, not feel disenfranchised by the differences in thought, or even in some cases, maybe even the hostility, but to feel some level of security, you know, and or protection?
Or confidence.
I know,
right?
I know we're supposed to get off, but I gotta say this. So, one of my closest, dearest friends is a white woman. She was born and raised in Loudoun County, and we have these conversations all the time. We have deep down, honest conversations. And few conversations ago, she was like, Vanessa, what can I do to help this cause? What can I do to educate other people, other white people, most particularly white women? And I said, talk to your people, honey. And I think I was joking with Jamie about this a few weeks ago. I said, talk to your people, talk to your white girlfriends who she shares things with me that they say. And I could just see it in her face. She's just horrified about people in her life that she considered friends and what they say, some of the ignorant comments they make. And I just say to her, just keep talking to them. I said, do you want me to talk to them? She's like, oh no. She's like, I'll talk to them first. And but I'm serious about that. And the other thing that I like to say to people is, if you want to know about what's going on in this country and this world with Black and brown people, you need to get yourself some Black friends. Okay? Just go find one. There are plenty of them at Wegmans and Target. Go find one.
Oh my Lord, not there. Yes.
But
Pick them.
But Vanessa, now you
Just
know
go
that,
pick one. Wait a minute. Let me
Vanessa,
finish. I said, just go find you a
Vanessa,
nice Black friend.
Stop. That is not sufficient. And you know it, because they're going to find that one Black friend who ain't really Black. So stop.
That's a whole nother show.
That's what I'm saying.
Hey, Bianca. Hey, Bianca, when we do that show, you got to come back.
Yes.
Listen, speaking of that, Bianca, I really appreciate again you coming out tonight to be part of the conversation.
Thank you for having me.
Stop playing.
As you can see, we can derail real quick, but our topic is still on point and it carries substance. So as we derail, it still carried weight and substance, and that's part of having a conversation. Is that we're not set in stone on what we talk about, because it's supposed to be a fluid conversation, and that's what we offer tonight. So we appreciate you coming out to that. And with that, we'd love to have you come back on December 6th to tell us how your Thanksgiving went and to further the conversation. If not December 6th, another Saturday in December would be great.
That'd be awesome.
Because
Thank you.
we really want to target families going out of 2020 because we realize there are going to be families this Thanksgiving that's missing family members at the table. And it could have been avoided. And one of our guests—
Zoom your Thanksgiving if you can, really. Zoom your Thanksgiving.
Hold on. One of our guests tonight that was supposed to be on the show, and I'll give Tara a shout out. She was going to speak to this conversation, and she's dealing with a situation with a family member with COVID, and that could have been prevented had we had things in place. So please keep Tara, she's a member of the group, in prayer for her family member. But that kind of infuriated me tonight, just to the fact that not that she wasn't able to participate, but that we're still dealing with that issue. And so we would love to have you come back because there's so much richness in dealing with the family as we close out 2020. That's what we want to do. So It's an open door for you to come back. If you can't make it the 6th, we'll figure out another date.
Oh, you know I can make it. No, thank you. This is
All
a
right,
great.
well, we're going to pencil you right on in there. And to Vanessa and to Kimberly and to Jamie, as always, thank you so much for being a part of the conversation. I could not do this without you. You are my girls. You got a place right here, and I don't put everybody here. You better know it. So I appreciate you. I want everybody to have a wonderful Thanksgiving holiday. Next week, we are taking a break because we have been working really hard. I want these ladies to enjoy their families and their friends and their men and their frenemies and all of that. Continue the shade throwing with your family. But I want y'all to rest and relax and enjoy. And we will be back on not December 6th. I'm sorry, it's December 5th is the Friday, is that Saturday. So we'll be back December 5th with another show. And until then, you guys all enjoy, stay safe. Give that direction. Go ahead, Jamie, about the Zoom.
A Zoom Thanksgiving is so much better than an ICU Christmas. Please, please. And wear your masks, wash your hands.
Enjoy
Throw Trump
your
out of the
family
White
social
House.
days.
Social
Yes.
distance.
Yes. So again, thank you. Ladies, if you can hang on real quick, we just want
Thank
to say
you, Bianca.
No,
Thank you,
you.
Bianca.
Thank you so much.
Yay.
Nice to meet you all. Thank you.
Bianca